Believe it or not, I don't think this is going to be my most controversial list video. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to another list video. And in this list, I am listing my 10 most disappointing books, or 10 books that disappointed me the most. I can't remember exactly what I titled it. And before I go any further, let me just say something. These are books that disappointed me. That doesn't mean they're bad books. It means they weren't as good as I thought they were going to be, or there was something about them that I didn't like. This is just strictly speaking my opinion based on my reading of these books. So, if you love these books, as many of you will love some of the books on this list, please be aware that to me, the list is made up of books that are just disappointed me, not necessarily books that I consider to be bad. So at number 10, I have probably the most obscure title, I think, on my list, and that is Teach Us to Outgrow Our Madness by the Japanese author Kenzaburo Oe. This really is a collection of 3 kind of novella-ish length stories, or long short stories, and they mainly revolve around father-son relationships. Oe had or has an interesting relationship with his own son, who I believe has disabilities. And there's a lot of kind of father-son dynamics here. And I have to be honest with you, the thing that disappointed me about this book is that it was by a Nobel Prize laureate. Oe has won the Nobel Prize. And I really expected that I would like it more than I did. Instead, I found it to be kind of painful reading experience, uncomfortable, a lot more kind of, I don't know, just kind of raw emotions or descriptions than I expected. And, so for that reason, I found it disappointing. At number 9, I have a book by, an author who at one time I probably would have said was one of my favorite authors, and that's Julian, and that book is England, England. This is a book that's, I think it's supposed to be a satire of English society, English culture, something like that. It's divided into 3 parts. One part where a young woman is putting together a puzzle of England or something, and then there's a part where a rich guy builds a theme park on the Isle of Wight, I believe, which is a representation of England and English culture. And then, anyway, so I think that because this is satire, and because the time I read it, probably didn't know enough about English society and culture to pick up on all the satirical points. I have a feeling this book went right over my head, but there was a really kind of uncomfortable sexual fetish discussed in the book, which didn't make it any better for me. And number 8 on my list is a book which I was really excited to read. I read about this book, I think, in New Yorker in a review long before I was ever on BookTube, and that book is Leaving Atocha Station by the writer Ben Lerner. I really thought, okay, here's a young writer, here's someone who's, books I'm going to want to read, who can become a new favorite, and I picked up Leaving Atocha Station thinking this would be a book that I really like, and I really did not like it. It's not a very long book, but it took me a long time to read. And this is one of those cases where, my expectations are really high, as they were with the Barnes book, because I liked Barnes so much, I thought I'd like all his work. But in this case, my expectations were high because new young writer, well regarded, and this was his first book. I thought, my expectations were really high, and what I found out was that I really didn't like the main character. I really wasn't interested in the story involving that character or any of the things revolving around him, and so I really did not like the book, and it really was a disappointment. At number 7, I have Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. Winterson is a well-respected author here on BookTube. You don't hear as much about her right now as you used to, but when her new book comes out, you will. And this was her first book, and as such, it's kind of a coming-of-age novel, sort of autobiographical about Winterson and her difficult relationship with her fundamentalist Christian evangelical mother, her burgeoning realization that she was a lesbian, and a relationship with another young woman, and then kind of involving a really rich fantasy life in which she imagined all kinds of things. And to be honest with you, I thought this would be a book that, again, made me a Jeanette Winterson fan. I would go on and read more her books. Instead, the opposite happened. The story is written well. There's lots of good imagery. I thought the fantasy sections were a little bit jarring and abrupt and kind of overwhelming. and the story about her relationship with her mother, which really was kind of revolved around her mother being a fundamentalist Christian, really didn't seem that surprising to me. It really seemed like something I'd read before, and as a result, I didn't think the book was all that great, and I haven't read another Winterson book, even though I know I should. At number 6, I have another book by an author who I'd read before and whose books some books I liked, and that's David Mitchell. I'd read Cloud Atlas, which, I understood, I thought, a good bit of, though not all of it, and I found parts of it to be really good. And I'd read The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, which I really, really liked, maybe except for some of kind of the ending parts. But I never read, The Bone Clocks, which I think kind of supposed to tie all of his works together. But I did read Utopia Avenue, and so Utopia Avenue is the number 6 book on my list of disappointing reads. And I just thought Utopia Avenue was pretty pedestrian. I thought its plot was, easy to see what was coming in terms of the fate of the bandmates. I knew what was going to happen almost, before it happened. And there were, the book is really replete with, these kind of fictional walk-on cameos by musicians of the late 1960s. By the way, Utopia Avenue is the name of a band in the late 1960s, which, has a modicum of success and is on its way perhaps to stardom when something interrupts that. And they meet, all kinds of people and famous people from the music industry, etc. And so, I thought sometimes that was cool and sometimes it wasn't. I thought that, Mitchell kind of got carried away with that. The guitar player in the band's last name is de Zoet. And so it has that tie-in with the Bone Clocks, again, which I haven't read. And anyway, I just found it to be kind of disappointing. I didn't think the plot was very good. I didn't think the characters were kind of stock and not really interesting. It's probably pretty hard to write a book about a band in which the characters don't, fit some stereotype we have about band members, rock band members or pop band members. But anyway, I was disappointed in that. And number 5 is the book I mentioned being disappointed in the most often on my channel, and that's Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Part of what I found really disappointing about this book was that I read the Satanic Verses first, and I really liked it. There was a time when the Satanic Verses was on my, top 10 books of all time list, and so I was eager to really dive into Rushdie and read more of his stuff. And Midnight's Children is supposed to be, his best book, the Booker of Bookers, the best Booker in 25 years, whatever award it won. And so I picked it up eagerly to read it, and I immediately became really bogged down and mired in what to me was a fairly, tedious and unsatisfying book. Now, again, this may have to do with the fact that I didn't know a whole lot about Indian history or Indian independence and the partition with Pakistan, etc. Know a whole lot about the culture of various parts of India or its geography. And so, the metaphors, the magical realism stuff really didn't mean that much to me, really didn't work for me, and it just became a real slog for me. And that was disappointing. And with the exception of the memoir Joseph Anton, I haven't read another Salman Rushdie novel since then. And number 4 on my list is the most recent book I think released on my list, and that's The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy. I've made a review of this book on this channel and its follow-up Stella Maris. So I read The Passenger like most people have read a lot of Cormac McCarthy. When I learned he had a new novel coming out, I was really hoping it would be excellent or at least good. And when I got with The Passenger, I just felt was bad. In place of the novel, we have a kind of stock, stereotypical McCarthy character, a man who can do anything and, is more manly than every other man. Just essentially going from one location to another, meeting one person after another, and then that person espousing some philosophy about life or something to them over and over again. And it really didn't feel like a novel so much as an excuse for McCarthy to get all his ideas out there about philosophy, the world, whatever it was out there. And I really didn't think it worked. By contrast, I thought Stella Maris was a lot tighter, a lot more focused, just 2 characters, 1 location. And I thought that actually worked much better. And number 3 on my list is the only classic on my list, and that is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I read this a couple of Victovers ago, and was really looking to get into Gaskell. I'd only read Cousin Phyllis and Cranford, and North and South was the longest, it was the first really long book or longer book by Gaskell I was going to read, and I just found it to be too much like Pride and Prejudice. You know, it is different, but in a sense, we have a virtuous, surprisingly beautiful young woman who comes from a family that is, you know, disappointing and not particularly wealthy, falling in love with an incredibly rich man who is arrogant and prideful, etc., etc. And, you know, eventually that romance works its way out. Now, the social commentary in the book I thought was really well handled, and, you know, reminded me a little bit of Zola in Germinal. But overall, the book I just thought felt derivative and like something I'd read before, done a little bit better. And number 2 on my list is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. If you watch my channel, you know that this is a book that I've expressed my disappointment in. And I think I'm that weird person who liked the campus novel half better than the reveal of what's really going on half a little bit better. By the time we got to the end, and I won't spoil the book, because, you know, it is possible to spoil that book, because there is kind of a aha moment for every reader in that book. But for me, it wasn't such an aha moment, even though I knew nothing about the book's plot and I had not seen the movie. When I got to the aha moment, I was like, that's it, that's what we get. And then the final scene, which is supposed to be this kind of climactic scene in which there's some hope, was just, not only was you know, that disappointing, but it was disappointing in a way which felt kind of perfunctory to me. So I was disappointed, Never Let Me Go, even though I'd enjoyed The Remains of the Day, and I think Pale View of Hills, another book by Ishiguro I read. And then the number 1 book on my list, the one that's going to get me kicked off BookTube for reminding people of that I was disappointed in, is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Wolf Hall is the only one of the Cromwell series or trilogy of Mantel's books that I have read, and I really thought this was going to be a me book. It's historical fiction. It's set during the Tudor period. It involves Henry VIII and his wives. I read it right after my wife and I had gone on a trip to London. We'd even been to Hampton Court. I thought, this is going to be a great book. This is going to be something I love. And I'll tell you that I thought the writing is brilliant in the book, but I just found it to be tedious and boring. It was like reading a really long book, the outcome of which I already knew. And no matter, you know, how much intrigue or character work was done or brilliant writing exists in the book, it just could not pull me through, the 500-600 or so pages of the book with enough interest to really want to continue reading the series. And so I may be the one person on BookTube who did not like or who was disappointed in Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Anyway, there you go. There's my list of 10 disappointing books. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comment section. Please do so in a friendly and respectful way. And I look forward to all those comments in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.